The blizzard of January 1885 was one for the ages in Crimson Peak, Wyoming, a storm that folks would whisper about for years to come. Snow blanketed the landscape, muffling the world in a thick white silence that swallowed fences and silenced the steady rhythm of frontier life. The wind howled down from the northern range, cutting the small town off from the outside world. No mail, no wagons, no distant train whistle. Life had shrunk to the warmth of a stove and the quiet breath of livestock huddled in their barns. Samuel Mercer stood alone at the depot station, a solitary figure against the swirling snow. For a week, he had kept this vigil, long after the other townsfolk had given up hope. In his gloved hand, he clutched a letter, its edges softened from countless readings. The faint ink still held the promise that had sustained him through the long, lonely months. From behind him, a small voice called out, "Pa." He turned to see his 6-year-old daughter, Sarah, her small form wrapped in her late mother's shawl, a simple brown dress peeking out from beneath. Her nose was pink from the cold, and her blue eyes held a wisdom far beyond her years. "She's not coming, is she?" "Miss Mylin?" Sarah asked, her voice barely a whisper. Samuel knelt to meet her gaze. "She was supposed to," he said softly. "She left California before the first snow." Sarah's voice wavered. "Maybe she changed her mind. Maybe she doesn't want to be my new mama." A muscle tightened in Samuel's jaw as he looked out at the snow-choked road. "No, Sarah," he said, his voice firm. "She didn't change her mind. Something went wrong." That evening, the livery doors burst open, and a half-frozen driver stumbled in. "Came in from Black Creek," someone whispered. Samuel pushed through the crowd. "You drove the party from California?" The man nodded, his voice a hoarse crackle. "Wagon tipped. Black Creek crossing." The ice on the river, it gave out. Samuel's heart hammered against his ribs. "Was there a young Chinese woman?" "Mylin?" The driver frowned in thought. "Brown eyes, quiet. Wore a red dress." "Yeah, she was there. Sweet thing. But when we crashed, it was chaos. I didn't see her after." Some were hurt, some walked off for help. The word struck Samuel with the force of the blizzard outside. Later that night, as Sarah slept, he sat in the quiet of the barn, a lantern casting a flickering glow on the letter in his lap. "I do not fear hardship, Mr. Mercer. If your heart is kind, and your daughter in need of warmth, then perhaps that is a life I could call mine." A small sound made him look up. Sarah stood there, barefoot, wrapped in a quilt. "You're going to find her, aren't you?" He paused, then nodded. "If she's out there, hurt or lost, I have to." The next morning, as the wind still howled, Samuel saddled his strongest horse, Boulder. He packed a wool blanket, a lantern, rope, dried meat, and a pouch of medicine. Mylin's letter he tucked close to his chest. The sheriff met him at the edge of town. "You're a fool, Samuel. That storm will bury a man in 10 minutes, then I'll ride faster," Samuel replied. "You've got a little girl to think of," the sheriff pressed. "That's why I'm going," Samuel said. "She deserves to know that when someone you care about is lost, you don't just wait." Sarah ran to him, her cheeks wet with tears. "Pa, don't let the snow swallow you." He hugged her tightly. "I'll come back. And if Miss Mylin is out there, I'll bring her home." With a final look at his daughter, he turned his horse toward the storm and rode into the blinding white. Samuel rode through a world muffled by snow. His breath plumed in the frigid air, and the lantern on his saddle cast a lonely, swinging light. By the second day, the blizzard subsided, leaving behind a vast, brittle silence. Late in the afternoon, he saw it, an old ranger station, a crooked silhouette half buried in snow, with a thin tendril of smoke rising from its chimney. Life. He pushed the door open to find 4 people huddled around a weak fire. "I'm looking for someone," Samuel said, his voice raw. "A Chinese woman." Mylin, an older woman with kind eyes, leaned forward. "You her intended?" Samuel nodded. "Sit a minute, son. You best hear what I have to tell." She explained how Mylin had been with them, a quiet but kind presence who had helped tend to the injured after the wagon rolled at Black Creek Crossing. She was calm, the woman said. pulled a little boy out from under a board before she even checked herself. Then she said she'd go for help. Headed north by mistake. Took the wrong ridgeline. I tried to stop her, but she was determined. Samuel thanked them and stepped back into the cold. He didn't need rest, he needed a sign. He found 1 hour later a scrap of red silk fluttering from a thorn bush. It was the color of the traditional cheongsam she had described in her letters. Nearby, the snow was disturbed. Faint impressions, small footprints, led deeper into the trees. He followed them until Boulder, his horse, snorted and stopped. In the snow was a smear of blood and a small leather pouch. Samuel's hands trembled as he opened it. Inside was a small, worn book of poetry and a slip of paper. Samuel Mercer, Crimson Peak. I hope I will be worthy to be your wife. It was her handwriting. He clutched the note to his chest. I'm coming, my Lynn, he whispered. I will find you. He mounted Boulder again, his eyes fixed on the path where someone small and brave had walked before vanishing into the white. The trail led him to the wreckage. The wagon was splintered, crushed by a massive boulder. Debris was scattered like bones in the snow, but there were no bodies. Then he saw it, another thread of red silk caught on a branch. A few feet away, the snow was disturbed, not by footprints, but by the faint drag marks of a hand, then another. Someone had crawled. The trail led to a dry creek bed where, at first, he saw only a snowbank. Then, his eyes caught the shape of a small hand, fingers curled against the cold, just barely visible above the snow. His heart stopped. My Lynn, she was half buried, her face pale, her lips tinged with blue. Her chest rose in shallow, fluttering gasps. No, 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 Samuel whispered, pulling off his coat and wrapping it around her. He cradled her head, brushing the snow from her face. A breath, barely there, ghosted against his cheek. I'm here, he whispered. Don't you quit on me now. Her lips moved, forming his name in a barely audible breath. Samuel, I said I'd come, he choked out. He gathered her into his arms. The forest was a blur as he carried her, his urgency overriding the biting cold and clawing branches. Just before dusk, he spotted the roof of an old trapper's cabin. He kicked the frozen door open and laid her gently on a pile of old pelts near the hearth before collapsing beside her, his chest heaving. Please, he whispered, his forehead against hers. Don't leave me. Don't leave Sarah. Outside, the wind screamed, but inside, the will to survive had never burned brighter. Samuel's trembling fingers worked quickly, tearing through the abandoned cabin supplies. He found old flint and dry moss, coaxing a flame to life in the hearth. The orange glow flickered across my Lynn's still, pale face. He carefully removed her frozen, tattered cheongsam and wrapped her in his own dry shirt and thick pelts. Her forehead was burning with fever. A frantic search of the cabin yielded a jar of dried willow bark. He boiled snow over the fire, steeped the bark, and held the steaming cup to her lips. Come on, my Lynn, he whispered. Come back to me. Hours later, a soft cough broke the silence. Her eyes fluttered open, pale and unfocused. Samuel, she croaked. He knelt beside her. You're safe. I found you. She blinked slowly. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to be this hard. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Don't ever apologize for surviving. Her lips trembled. I was trying to come to you, she whispered. I wanted to be worthy of the letters you wrote. Samuel swallowed hard. And I wanted to be the man you believed I was. A comfortable silence settled between them, broken only by the crackle of the fire. My daughter's name is Sarah, he said quietly. She's 6. She's brave, like her mother. My Lynn turned her head weakly. I always dreamed of meeting her. I wondered if she'd like me. Samuel looked at her, a faint smile touching his lips. She hoped you'd smile more than her ma did. I think you do. A low howl from outside cut through the moment. Samuel rose, his hand going to the rifle near the door. Wolves. He peered through a crack in the shutters, catching the glint of eyes in the darkness. He helped my Lynn to the farthest corner, concealing her behind a stack of crates. Her hand clutched his sleeve. "You won't leave me," he knelt beside her, his voice low and steady. "I'll stand between you and whatever's out there. I promise." He loaded his rifle and stood silhouetted against the firelight, a fierce guardian in the vast, unforgiving wilderness. The wolves attacked when the wind died, their forms emerging from the shadows of the trees. Samuel stood his ground before the cabin door, the firelight behind him casting a long, defiant shadow. My Lin, weak but resolute, watched him from her hiding place. A growl ripped through the night, followed by the glint of several pairs of eyes. Samuel fired a warning shot into the air, the sound cracking through the frozen silence. Most of the shapes retreated, but one large wolf lunged from the tree line. Samuel swung the rifle, but the beast was too fast. It was on him in a flash of teeth and claws, and they crashed into the snow, the rifle flying from his grasp. He wrestled with the animal, his hands buried in its thick fur, desperately trying to keep its jaws from his throat. Pain flared as teeth tore through his shoulder. Hearing the struggle, My Lin's spirit surged. Her body was weak, but her will was iron. She grabbed a heavy iron ladle from the hearth and stumbled towards a rusted barrel in the corner. With all her might, she began slamming the heavy wooden lid onto the barrel, creating a series of sharp, echoing clangs that sliced through the night. The unnatural sound startled the other wolves, and they backed away into the trees. The wolf on top of Samuel snarled one last time before bolting after its pack. Samuel rolled over, panting, blood seeping from his torn sleeve. My Lin dropped the lid and collapsed, her breath coming in shallow gasps. He crawled to her, his voice a mixture of relief and fear. "Why did you do that? You're half frozen. You were out there alone," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I couldn't do nothing." He pressed his forehead to hers. "Don't ever scare me like that again. I thought I'd lost you." Later, with the fire stoked and Samuel's shoulder bandaged, he sat beside her. He pulled the torn scrap of her red cheongsam from his pocket. With a small bone needle and thread he had fashioned, his raw fingers began to stitch the fabric. "This isn't much," he said, his eyes on his work, "but maybe it will remind you of the day I found you." "What day?" she asked softly. "The day I found you," he repeated, half buried in snow, but still breathing. He handed the mended silk to her. Her fingers traced the fresh seam. "I'm not what you think I am," she whispered, a quiet tremor in her voice. "I have no dowry, no family name. I thought when you saw me, you'd change your mind." He took her hand and placed it over his heart. "What I saw," he said gently, "was the woman who walked into a blizzard to keep her word. I fell for the heart behind every letter. That's the part of you I cherished." Tears welled in her eyes. "I wanted so badly to be enough." "You are," he said firmly. "You were, even before I found you." She closed her eyes and leaned against his shoulder, a sense of safety finally allowing her exhausted body to relax. Outside, the wind howled, but inside the small cabin, something stronger than fear had taken root, something that felt, for the first time, like the beginning of home. When Samuel Mercer rode back into Crimson Peak, the snow had begun to melt. My Lin sat before him on the saddle, wrapped in a heavy wool blanket, his arms a secure circle around her. The townsfolk paused to watch, their curiosity a palpable presence. Near the mercantile, a small figure in a brown dress burst into view. "Pa!" Sarah called out, her boots splashing in the muddy puddles. She stopped short when she saw My Lin, her eyes wide. "Pa," she whispered, "did you bring back a snow angel?" My Lin was given a room at the boarding house to recover. Samuel insisted on it, but Sarah didn't believe in space. The next morning, she arrived with a warm cornbread muffin and her beloved rag doll. "She's for you," Sarah said solemnly, "until you get your own." From that moment, My Lin became a fixture in Sarah's days. She braided her hair and listened to the child's soft memories of her mother. Sometimes, Sarah whispered one afternoon, "I think Mama sent you so Pa wouldn't be sad anymore." Each evening, Samuel came to visit, and they would sit on the porch, talking softly as the chill evening air settled around them. He told her about the ranch and about Sarah, who had started humming while she brushed her teeth. "She never used to do that," he said with a small smile. That's because she's happy, My Lin replied. And you? He asked gently. She looked down at her hands. I'm learning how to be. But as My Lin began to heal, whispers started to circulate through the town. She must be running from something, someone murmured outside the mercantile. I heard she has no family. Just showed up and latched onto Samuel Mercer, the wagon driver from Black Creek, holding court in the saloon, added fuel to the fire. I remember what she said when the wagon tipped. I can't go back there, said it like her life depended on it soon. My Lin was no longer the brave survivor, but a stranger with a secret. The sideways glances and paused conversations followed her whenever she dared to step outside. She retreated into herself, the weight of the town's suspicion pressing down on her. One evening, Samuel knocked on her door to find a half-packed bag on her bed. You're leaving? He asked, his voice heavy. She nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I can't stay. They're talking about you, about Sarah. I won't let my past bring trouble to your family or My Lin, he said, his voice low and steady. We found each other for a reason. Don't let people who don't know you decide your future. A soft voice from the doorway broke the tense silence. Are you really going? Sarah stood there, clutching her doll, her eyes wide and pleading. My Lin's resolve crumbled. She knelt and hugged the little girl tightly. I don't want you to go, Sarah whispered. Samuel knelt beside them. If you're leaving because you want something else, I'll let you go. But if you're leaving because of fear, you're letting them win. Crimson Peak doesn't get to decide who you are. You do. My Lin looked up at him, her hand resting on Sarah's hair. I'm just so tired of running, she whispered. Then stop, Samuel urged gently. Stay. With us. The next morning, as the sun melted the last remnants of the winter snow, My Lin walked the familiar path to Samuel's ranch. Sarah saw her first and ran into her open arms. I'm sorry if I made you sad, the little girl whispered, but I don't want you to go. Not ever. Samuel stepped onto the porch, his gaze calm and steady. I don't know what you've decided, he said, but wherever you stand, I'll be on the side that has you in it. My Lin rose, still holding Sarah's hand. I've run my whole life, she said, her voice clear and strong. But when I was lying in that snow, broken and afraid, I only thought of you and Sarah. I don't want to run anymore. I want a family. I want to stay. A joyful laugh escaped Sarah. Samuel stepped forward, pulling a simple silver ring from his pocket. It's not to bind you, he said softly, just to remind you that you're not alone. My Lin, will you stay and be my wife? Tears streamed down her face, but her smile was radiant. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll stay. The whispers in Crimson Peak didn't vanish overnight, but they were slowly replaced by something else, respect. The town saw My Lin at the church, helping children with their letters. They saw her guiding Sarah's small hand as she learned to write her name. They saw the way Samuel looked at her, as if a long-held prayer had finally been answered. One golden afternoon, the three of them climbed the hill behind the ranch. Green shoots were pushing through the damp earth, a vibrant promise of spring. Samuel reached for My Lin's hand. The first time I found you, he said, you were covered in snow. Now look at you, standing in the sunlight. She smiled, her fingers lacing with his. Thank you, she whispered, for finding me twice. Once in the snow, and once in my fear. In that quiet corner of the vast frontier, where the wind could either bury or bless, they had built more than a house. They had built a home.